Module 6 Lesson 7's objective is to represent measurement data with line plots. Item B. How many buildings are 4¼ inches tall? In order to determine the answer to this question, you need to use the information from the other side of this worksheet. Look at your line plot. Count how many X's that you made for 4¼ inches tall. That is the answer to item B. Don't forget to answer in a sentence. Blank buildings are 4¼ inches tall. Item C. How many buildings are less than 3½ inches? As I look at my line plot, I can see that there are buildings that are 3 inches, 3¼ inches, 3½, 3¾ 4, 4¼ and 4½ inches tall. This question asks how many buildings are less than 3½ inches. So don't count the buildings that are 3½ inches and taller. You only need to count the buildings that are on your line plot for 3 inches and 3¼ inches, because 3½ inches is not less than 3½ inches. So I'm going to underline this less than 3½ inches. To remind you, you need to only count the ones that are less than 3½ inches. Then we need to answer the question in a sentence. Blank buildings are less than 3½ inches. Item D says, how many buildings are in the class model? How do you know? I'm going to highlight that. How many buildings are in the class model? And then I'm going to underline, how do you know? You don't want to forget to answer part of the problem's questions. In order to determine how many buildings are in the class model, we need to count all of the X's that are present on the line plot. There are blank buildings in the class model. Now we need to know how you know. I know because I counted all the X's on the line plot. And the last question says, Brooke says most buildings in the model are at least 4 inches tall. Is she correct? Explain your thinking. I'm going to underline most buildings in the model are at least 4 inches tall. And I'm going to circle at least. I'm going to highlight, is she correct? And underline the word explain. Are most buildings in the model at least 4 inches tall? That means, are they 4 inches, 4¼ or 4½ inches tall? Is she correct in saying that? Yes or no? And explain why. If most of the buildings are not 4¼ or 4½ inches tall, then you need to explain that she is not correct because more buildings are less than 4 inches tall than are at least 4 inches tall. Don't forget to answer the question in a sentence. Brooke, and then you're going to choose is or is not correct because blank. If she's correct, then that means most of the buildings are at least 4 inches tall or more. If she is not correct, they are less than 4 inches tall. Good luck.